The ballroom shimmered beneath chandeliers of suspended crystal, their refracted light casting glimmers across banners of a dozen alien empires. The diplomat moved through it with the patience of a tide, every step deliberate, every smile measured. His colleagues from Earth called him Marcus Hale, special envoy of the Terran Assembly. The galaxy called him something far less impressive. The polite man. He cultivated that image carefully, a figure of steady reason in a universe addicted to bluster and intimidation. His enemies dismissed him as harmless. His allies mistook his composure for frailty. Only a rare few knew better. Marcus carried himself as if gravity bent slightly differently for him than for others, as if the weight of entire wars pressed against his shoulders and he had learned how to hide it beneath tailored suits. Tonight, however, he allowed himself a rare indulgence. His daughter drifted along the balcony above the hall, peering through carved rails at the tapestry of species below. 17 years old, wide-eyed, and endlessly curious, Leora had inherited her mother's smile but none of her father's talent for masking it. She leaned dangerously over the railing to watch a group of insected traders click their mandibles in negotiation, laughter bubbling up from her throat. Marcus glanced up at her, warmth softening his usually steady gaze. For an instant, the diplomat was only a father, indulging a daughter's wonder. He lifted his glass in mock salute, and she grinned back, mouthing something he could not hear but already knew, "Don't be boring." She never let him forget that he was a man, not only a title. The negotiations below pressed forward with the usual theater. Alien dignitaries postured, wings flared, tails twitched. Promises of peace floated like perfumed smoke, concealing sharp edges of power and ambition. Marcus responded with the same quiet voice that had dismantled entire coalitions without ever raising a weapon. Yet his attention kept drifting upward to Leora's reflection in the crystal light. He had long since accepted that his calm was a shield she never had to see through. Somewhere among the crowd, a shadow moved. The gala had drawn more than diplomats and traders. It had drawn opportunists, ones who saw humanity as a novelty, not a force. Leora's laughter drew their gaze like blood draws predators. By the time Marcus turned his eyes back to her, the balcony was empty. He felt the change before anyone noticed it. Not panic. Not shock. A tightening, like the air before a storm. He set down his glass, its ring against the table sharp enough to silence the insected merchants mid-hiss. He excused himself with a bow, voice perfectly calm. To the others it looked like an ordinary departure, another envoy taking a break from endless talk. Only those closest saw it, the sudden precision in his stride, the way his shoulders squared as though slipping into a forgotten uniform. In a dim corridor beyond the ballroom, the faintest echo of a struggle clung to the air, fabric rustling, a muffled cry. He crouched, fingertips brushing the floor. A thread of pale silk lay torn against the stone. Leora's. He pocketed it without a word. By the time a security officer arrived, Marcus already knew. The culprits were a rogue faction of the Karuk, a species whose arrogance had survived countless defeats. They had always despised humanity's presumption at the negotiating table. Tonight they had chosen a demonstration, a reminder that power was not measured in words. They believed that by seizing the diplomat's daughter, they had taken a piece from the board too fragile to protect itself. The officer stammered an offer of assistance. Marcus silenced him with a glance. "You'll do nothing," he said softly, though the weight of command behind it pressed the air flat. "This matter is not for committees or councils. This is personal." The young guard blinked, unsure whether to obey or protest, but Marcus was already moving. His expression remained composed, but the shift was unmistakable. Gone was the man who spent decades weaving peace from chaos. What remained was something colder, older, and infinitely more dangerous. The galaxy had forgotten, but he had not. In his mind, words long buried rose like a mantra. Rule number 1: never touch what is mine. It was not anger that stirred in him, nor grief. It was inevitability. He had lived by rules forged in fire before treaties and councils had softened his image. He had buried that side of himself under diplomacy and civility. But when his daughter vanished into the night, those walls crumbled like paper. As he stepped back into the glittering hall, the alien delegates turned curiously, expecting explanation. Marcus offered none. He passed them with the faintest of smiles, the kind that made predators feel suddenly like prey. Conversations faltered. A hush spread, as though some primal instinct warned them of a predator walking silently among them. Up on the balcony, a lone crystal swung gently where Liara had leaned not long before. It caught the light and scattered it across the room, tiny shards glinting like knives. Marcus paused beneath it, gaze steady, posture unyielding. The polite man was gone. What remained was death in disguise, moving with the patience of inevitability toward those foolish enough to believe they could touch his blood and live. The gala resumed behind him in strained murmurs, but the true story of the night had already begun, echoing in footsteps that carried the quiet promise of ruin. Marcus Hale did not rush. Predators rarely did. He walked through the city of glass towers and violet skies with the same measured pace he used in council chambers, though inside, each step was a countdown. His daughter's captors believed they had time to negotiate, to taunt, to show the galaxy that humanity's calm diplomat could be unbalanced with a single stolen child. They could not imagine he had once commanded wars in which hours meant empires lost or saved. They could not know that patience, in his hands, was a blade sharper than any weapon. The Karuk faction responsible for the abduction had made their first mistake within minutes. They left a trail, not of evidence, but of arrogance. A message had already been delivered to the council chambers, demanding concessions and threatening unfortunate consequences if their conditions were not met. The wording was predictable, almost theatrical, as though written for an audience rather than an adversary. Marcus read it once, then deleted it. They wanted him cornered. Instead, they had just marked themselves. He slipped through the underlevels of the alien metropolis, past districts where the veneer of diplomacy never reached. Here, lights flickered, languages tangled, and power was traded in shadows. It was a place Marcus had visited often in the past, though few would guess it from his polished demeanor. Old contacts recognized him, not as an envoy, but as something far more unsettling. Doors opened at his approach, whispers following like smoke. A one-eyed smuggler leaned against a steel arch, mandibles clacking nervously. "Hale," it rasped. "Didn't think I'd see you here again." "You won't," Marcus replied, voice even. "Tell me where the Karuk moved their cargo tonight." The smuggler hesitated, as though torn between profit and fear. Then Marcus simply looked at him. No threat, no weapon, only that unblinking patience. The alien shuddered and gave him everything: docking schedules, hidden routes, names of crews. Marcus nodded once, then walked on. The smuggler exhaled with relief, unaware that what he had felt was not negotiation but survival instinct. Above, the council still debated their official response, layering words upon words, weaving protocols into knots. They would act only when consensus had calcified into something resembling courage. Marcus did not intend to wait. He had once commanded soldiers who operated in the silence between seconds, whose orders had carved paths through enemies too stunned to react. That instinct was alive again, coiled in every muscle. Meanwhile, Liara sat bound in a dim cargo hold, the air thick with the tang of fuel and metal. Her captors argued in harsh clicks, debating whether to move her or broadcast their demands more loudly. She watched with an expression too calm for her age. Her father had taught her that fear was noticed, exploited, weaponized. So she remained still, eyes sharp, recalling the way Marcus once showed her how to read a room: who spoke too loudly, who deferred, who carried themselves like they owned the ground. Even tied to a chair, she was his daughter. And she knew, as surely as she knew her own name, that he was coming. Back in the Undercity, Marcus secured transport, an unmarked shuttle whose owner handed over the keys without asking why. Information from the smuggler aligned with his own deductions. The kidnappers were heading for an asteroid station in the Outer Ring, a place notorious for piracy and forgotten treaties. It was exactly where arrogance would lead them, somewhere they could hide behind reputation and numbers. As he piloted the shuttle into orbit, Marcus's mind moved like a blade across possibilities. He did not plan to storm the fortress with brute force. That would be expected, and expectation bred counters. He would arrive not as an army, but as a storm, unseen until it broke across their defenses. He reviewed every rumor about the Karuk faction, every name attached to them, every weakness whispered in the margins of intelligence reports. The picture formed quickly: proud, reckless, addicted to displays of dominance. They were loud because they feared silence. They took a diplomat's daughter because they mistook civility for weakness. The galaxy had made the same mistake before. Entire fleets had once underestimated human persistence, only to find themselves undone by attrition and ingenuity. Marcus remembered those nights, the hushed tones of alien generals trying to explain how their overwhelming numbers had evaporated against a force that should not have survived. He had been there, directing, adapting, reshaping chaos into inevitability. That legacy was hidden now beneath polished shoes and polite phrases, but it had not vanished. The shuttle broke atmosphere, stars unfolding like blades across black velvet. Marcus adjusted the controls with steady hands, his reflection in the viewport hard and unreadable. Somewhere ahead, Leora waited, trusting without question that he would come. The Karuk believed they were holding leverage. In truth, they had placed themselves in his grasp. He spoke aloud for the first time since leaving the gala, his voice low, measured, final. "You thought you stole my weakness," he said to the empty cabin. "You stole your own chance to live." The words hung in the silence as the shuttle angled toward the asteroid belt, engines burning like the heartbeat of a predator closing in. Marcus Hale was no longer the polite man of council chambers. He was inevitability, sharpened by loss, moving toward those who had yet to realize they were already condemned. And in the shadows of the galaxy, whispers began to stir, rumors that the diplomat had stopped speaking softly, and was preparing to remind the stars what humanity truly was when provoked. The asteroid fortress loomed ahead like a jagged scar against the stars, its hull stitched together from stolen warships and derelict freighters. To the untrained eye it was chaos, but Marcus Hale read it like a dossier. He saw the weak seams in the patchwork armor, the blind zones in overlapping sensors, the arrogance in the way its lights blazed across the void as if daring the galaxy to notice. He slipped the shuttle into the shadow of a drifting hauler, engines muted, and moved with the kind of precision that came from decades of studying battlefields no one admitted he had shaped. Inside the fortress, Leora sat upright despite the restraints, her gaze steady on the leader of the Karuk cell. He paced before her, wings twitching, mandibles clattering as he rehearsed threats. His underlings laughed, feeding on bravado, but she did not flinch. Her father had taught her that silence could be sharper than protest. Each second she remained calm, the more their confidence frayed, though they could not see it. Somewhere deep down, they already sensed that they had misjudged everything. Marcus entered through an unguarded vent shaft, his path chosen not for speed but inevitability. He left behind no alarms, no corpses, nothing to alert the kidnappers until it was far too late. His arrival in the chamber was announced only by the sound of measured footsteps against metal flooring. The laughter died instantly. The Karuk leader turned, mandibles spreading in a sneer. "So the diplomat comes crawling. Where are your soldiers, human? Where are your vaunted fleets?" Marcus did not answer at once. He walked into the center of the room, unarmed, his suit immaculate, his gaze unblinking. Leora's eyes brightened, though her expression remained controlled. He inclined his head to her, the smallest gesture of reassurance, then turned his attention to the kidnappers. "You believe," he said softly, "that you hold the advantage. You believe my daughter is a chain on my throat. But what you have actually taken is the key that unlocks something you cannot survive." The leader hissed, raising a blade with theatrical flourish. "You will beg, human." Marcus smiled faintly, a smile that never reached his eyes. Begging was never in the curriculum. His tone remained calm, but each word landed like a verdict. "I was a diplomat, yes. But before that, I was the architect of campaigns you call accidents. I am the silence that hollowed your fleets. I am the man who taught entire systems the cost of underestimating humanity. And you have just reminded me of my first rule." The chambers seemed to shrink around his voice. Even the Karuk soldiers shifted uneasily, their bravado fraying beneath something they could not quite name. Leora, bound and silent, knew exactly what it was. The leader lunged, blade flashing. Marcus moved once, precise and efficient, and the weapon clattered to the floor. The alien collapsed beside it, clutching a shattered limb, his scream cut short by the diplomat's quiet command. Sit! The word carried no volume, yet it pressed harder than any strike. The others hesitated. Their instincts screamed to attack, but something deeper, older, told them that death had already entered the room and wore a human face. Marcus's eyes passed over them with the indifference of a surgeon selecting instruments. Then he acted, not with wild fury, but with cold certainty. Each movement was deliberate, a lesson in economy. Strikes landed where they ended resistance in an instant, not messy but final. One by one, the kidnappers fell, not as enemies in battle but as pawns removed from a board already lost. When silence returned, only the leader remained conscious, trembling beneath Marcus's steady gaze. You wish to send a message, Marcus said. Here it is. Humanity does not negotiate with those who touch what is ours. We do not bargain. We end. He left the alien alive, broken but breathing, because fear carried further than corpses. He turned, knelt by his daughter, and loosened her restraints. For the first time that night, the cold mask cracked, and a father's warmth bled through. Are you hurt? Leora shook her head, her composure finally softening as she leaned into him. I knew you'd come. I always will. He held her close for a moment, then rose with her at his side. The fortress around them was already shifting, its inhabitants scattering as whispers of what had happened spread through the corridors. None dared confront him. They parted like water before a blade. Back aboard the shuttle, as the asteroid fortress shrank into the distance, Leora watched her father in silence. She had always known he was more than the polite man at the council tables, but tonight she had seen the truth laid bare. Diplomacy was his mask, but death was his nature. She touched his hand, both comforted and unsettled by the steadiness she felt there. Marcus did not look at her, eyes fixed on the stars ahead. He knew what would follow. Word of this night would ripple through the galaxy, whispered in fear and awe. The myth of human diplomacy would shift forever, its civility now indistinguishable from threat. Aliens would remember the Karuk not as victors but as fools who had touched what was his. As the shuttle slipped into the dark, Marcus's voice cut through the silence, low and certain, meant for his daughter but destined for the galaxy. Rule number 1, he said. Never touch what is mine. The stars seemed to lean closer, listening, as if even they understood that a line had been drawn. And somewhere in the void, the galaxy trembled, realizing it had mistaken patience for weakness and discovered too late that the human diplomat was death in disguise.